Hey, welcome back to Transform Your Workplace, the show where we explore what's really shaping work today: leadership, culture, trust, and the practical decisions that either help people thrive or quietly hold organizations back. My goal with this podcast is simple: bring you honest conversations with smart people so you can build a workplace that actually works for your business and your people. Before we jump in, a quick thank you to our sponsor, Xenium HR. Xenium partners with growing organizations through a complete HR and payroll solution. That means expert HR guidance, compliant payroll processing, benefits administration, and day-to-day support, all working together, not in silos. If you're trying to lead, stay compliant, and scale without burning out your internal team, that integrated approach really matters. You can learn more at xeniumhr.com. All right, today's conversation is one a lot of leaders need right now, whether they realize it or not. I'm joined by my colleague, Nicole Blevins, who leads compensation planning at Xenium. And if you've ever felt uneasy talking about pay, struggled with fairness concerns, or wondered whether your compensation practices would hold up against scrutiny, this episode is for you. We get into what compensation structure actually means, why winging it works until it doesn't, and what tends to break as organizations grow without clear guardrails. Nicole shares why structure doesn't limit flexibility, it actually creates it. We also talk about pay equity, transparency laws, and the real risks of avoiding this work because it feels uncomfortable or overwhelming. You'll hear how strong compensation practices build trust, help managers have better conversations, reduce gossip, and protect your business from costly mistakes. And if you're wondering how often this stuff needs to be revisited or what signals tell you it's time, we'll cover that too. This is practical, grounded. All right, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Nicole Blevins. Nicole, it is so good to have you back. Thanks for coming on.
Of course, I'm
Me
excited.
too. I don't know when the last time I covered a compensation topic has been, but you took over compensation services for Xenium. We've done
Yeah,
historically compensation consulting for a long time. I think it's really important. I think a lot of
yeah,
employers, just in seeing the landscape, I think a lot of employers backed off of compensation structuring, and because it's been an employer's market for a little while. But let's back up to the
yeah.
start, because compensation structure, that phrase gets thrown around a lot. What does that mean exactly?
It
And then
does.
where do leaders tend to get it wrong when talking about and thinking about compensation structuring?
Yeah. I think when we talk about a compensation structure, we're really talking about like the framework that guides how pay decisions are made across the organization. That's really what we're talking about. And having a really strong compensation structure that defines like how you're grouping your positions and what the pay ranges are going to be, how employees move within that structure is really important because it provides that consistency, right? That clarity. It also creates like defensibility if you were to get like an Equal Pay Act claim or some of those things. You have a really good framework or structure to point to of how you're making those pay decisions. And I think like the biggest misconception that employers have around this is if I create this structure, it's going to be like too structured and it like doesn't allow me to be flexible with my compensation. And I think like the reality is it's actually the
Hmm.
opposite, right? Having that framework gives you the guardrails that you need to make informed decisions without having to like reinvent the wheel each time or worry about, am I being fair and consistent? Am I paying what the market is demanding for this type of role? That's really what we're talking about when we're talking about comp structure.
Why do you think comp structure matters so much as organizations grow? And then if an employer didn't have a formal comp structure, what typically breaks throughout their organization if they're growing but without a structure in place?
Yeah, I think when you are making pay decisions without a structure, not only are you like trying to reinvent the wheel each time of just like, all right, what should I pay for this position? What is the person asking for versus what is my budget? You're trying to figure all of that out in the moment when you've got a candidate that maybe you want to be able to make those decisions or have those conversations a little bit more quickly and more structured and have a framework and understanding of what what is the market value of this position rather than someone just coming in and asking for a really high number or something like that. So I think that's what happens. And then what breaks is when you're just making decisions off of maybe what the person is asking for, or your own kind of sentiment or thoughts of what you think the position is worth or valued at, there's the risk of one, you not paying enough to be able to actually get that talent that you need in your position, be able to retain them long term. Or the opposite, overpaying for a position. You might have pay compression issues if you've got people internally that were maybe hired or didn't negotiate in the recruitment process because they weren't as savvy in that area. And then that can create all kinds of issues, right? Pay equity issues, Equal Pay Act violations potentially. So there's a lot that can break, right, when you don't have that type of structure. And I think for a long time, organizations have gotten by with that in terms of there there weren't as many laws and compliance restrictions as there are now, with so many different states now having very specific Equal Pay Act laws or pay equity requirements for positions. And so it's just the demand for having a clear and consistent type of structure is heightened because of all of these changes and things that are coming through. And employees are just
Yeah.
more savvy too. And there's so much more information out there and conversations being happen. It's not as much of a like taboo
Yeah.
topic as it was in the past. And so that is impacting things here
Yeah.
too.
And I think like we know employees are talking with other employees about pay. So it's no
Right.
secret and they're going to find
Yeah.
out one way or another. So it seems to me like having the compensation structure that we're being transparent about with our employees actually sets expectations around what it takes to get to a certain level and what these types of
Yeah.
jobs, what their range is. So it's all very clear versus the
Yeah.
secrecy of it all seems it gives me the
Yeah.
ick factor in a lot of ways. Think about that. Just is this a more transparent
Yeah.
approach to have a structure?
I do. I think it's a more transparent approach. It's okay, go ahead, talk to your coworkers about it because you're all going to find that you're within the same pay grade and you're it's great. Go ahead. There's more of that transparency, but also some organizations will put together a structure and maybe not want to share the full
Mm,
structure out to their team. I think a lot of different organizations have very varied levels of like how transparent they want to be. Do they want to show the whole structure? Do they want to just have that conversation with the employee on where they fall within the structure? But regarding the level of transparency you choose, if you choose maybe not to share out the whole structure, you still have a good framework to be able to have those like direct conversations with the person of why is this position being paid more than I am? That position's in a higher pay grade. It requires more of a level of skills or certification or education or whatever those nuances are. And so it just helps you to be able to navigate those conversations better as
I think
well.
you're alluding to it earlier, but with something comes up to mind is if you don't have a structure in place, and let's say like you have a key employee in a whatever area, but there's many
Yeah.
employees in that same function, and they're like, "Hey, look, I'm about ready to leave. Like, I got an offer," and then the manager fights for them, gives them a huge raise based on them about to walk out the door because they don't want to lose that talent. And then what does that do to the rest of the group? So like in secrecy, they just got a raise because
Yeah.
they were about to leave and negotiated their way to it. And then now you have inequities. Like to me, that seems like a huge risk
Right.
when you don't have a structure.
It is. It is. It creates a huge pay compression issue because we've now paid someone more when we've got many other people performing the same job and getting paid significantly less. That can violate some Equal Pay Act laws depending on the state. Every state has different laws and guidance around that, but it creates equity issues. And it's really important that if we're going to make an adjustment and we're going to decide as an organization that this position is worth more to us internally to it filled, have really good talent in that role, that we're making those adjustments and we're looking at the market data to make those adjustments as well. And I just it, proactively looking at that is really helpful because in the moment it's stressful to have an employee come to you and be like, I feel like I'm not paid enough. I have this other offer where I'm being paid, going to potentially be paid more, can you match that? To be able to have wage data to look at, have information that you can get to have that conversation with the employee to find something that's going to work, but also just look at the organization as a whole, right? Like we want to be fair and consistent and make sure that we're not creating any of these issues that could create legal liability for us later if we just in the heat of the moment make this decision, right? What are all of the other down the line impacts that we're not thinking about that we might need support in evaluating or figuring out where we go from here and what other adjustments we might need to make as a
I
result
remember
as
once
well.
upon a time, pay equity analysis really wasn't a thing. And it wasn't until the laws started coming out across
Yeah.
different states. You might have to educate me on the laws that are in place right now, but
Yeah.
it felt optional for companies to even do something like this.
Yeah.
But what's changed about the laws and just the landscape that makes pay equity analysis not optional and something they can't afford to ignore anymore?
Yeah. Yeah, I think in the past pay equity like analysis have been like a nice to have, like it'd be cool if we could look at that, but it wasn't necessarily a priority. I think it's more of a priority now because so many different states are having very nuanced and specific laws about equal pay. I will say Oregon and specifically has some laws around this, and what's interesting about Oregon is there is a safe harbor provision in the law that basically says if you are proactive and you do a pay equity analysis and you're looking at this information regularly to identify any potential gaps, it will actually save you a little bit if you were to get a claim for an employee for a pay equity violation or something like that. It will lessen kind of those penalties that you could experience because you can show that you were proactive in evaluating and looking at this and addressing any issues that were identified. So it can be really helpful in situations like that, especially if it's a state where doing something like that proactively and being able to show the documentation and the process that you went through to prevent any potential pay equity issues can really help in a lot of cases. So that's what I think is really valuable about doing something like that. And also, it just gets ahead of those conversations and those things that are eventually going to happen. While it might not be happening now, eventually, right, it's going to happen and make its way up to leadership. And then you're going to have to address it and solve that problem. So if we can think about it strategically and proactively of how can we get ahead of this, how can we prevent the little gossipy whisper conversations from happening by looking at this ahead of time, making sure that we are being fair and consistent, and then we're right sizing any of these changes as well. Sorry, one other quick thing I thought of that I'll share that's interesting about Oregon as well is there's language in the law that's if you have been paying someone really high and you need to make some pay equity adjustments here, you can't just reduce that person's pay to
Get to elevate
fix the
everybody else,
problem.
right?
You've got to elevate everybody up, right? Yeah. And so that is a huge budget
Yeah.
consideration. So it's just like another argument or reason as to like why having a comp structure is important on the front end and looking at what is this position actually
Hmm.
worth
Hmm.
and being consistent about that. So when you do that pay equity analysis, if you avoid even getting to that point where you have to
Yeah.
make those
You
shifts.
might know this about me, Nicole, but I don't love laws for the sake of having laws, but there's always benevolence behind
Sure.
it. There's always a reason that laws are put in place for
Yeah.
protection. And a lot of laws, they have downstream consequences, either positive or negative.
Sure.
And I'm curious if the pay transparency laws that have been put in place have had really positive impact on trust, fairness. So culturally, I'm curious. I want to hear what your take is on that. But I could see where you just gave that example where pay transparency laws actually increase costs for an employer because they had to right size everybody. So you now put a law in place where it actually
Yeah,
negatively impacted an
potentially.
employer, whereas maybe they don't have huge profit margins and they're struggling as a business, and now all of a
Yeah.
sudden they're in a bad position. So walk me through the positives and negatives.
Yeah, yeah, it's like the no good
Yeah.
deed goes unpunished conversation, right? There's always two ends to that coin, and I think it initially the intent is that employees have a better understanding of kind of what a position is worth because there are marginalized groups that don't have the ability or haven't received like the experience or education to be able to just like negotiate. Like I think of like salespeople are like really good about like selling themselves and things. And I'm like, that is not me. I'm not as good at that. And, that can have the impact of creating some variances in situations like that when maybe both individuals are going to be doing the same work, right? And providing the same value to an organization. And as a result should be paid the same. So there's that whole like conversation of intent. And in a lot of ways, I think that has helped a lot of people. There's laws that have been enacted about you need to post what the range of the position is, right? So that's
Mm,
another requirement where it's hard to post a range on your job postings if you don't have a structure of what
right.
range the positions are worth. So there's that too, but I think there's a lot of positives for employees, right? Like understanding what that looks like, understanding their value. Employers from a budgeting standpoint of looking at the market, ensuring they're competitive, that they're budgeting appropriately for the talent that they have and the value that their employees are bringing. There are some consequences, for lack of a better term, of if it's not done right on the front end or you're a startup and you're just operating of trying to get talent and people quickly, you can create some issues for yourself down the line and having to right size some of that or address any inequities that might come up. So yeah, it's the no good
Yeah.
deed goes unpunished. So it just makes it even more important and why it's like not just a nice to have thing anymore of doing a pay equity analysis or like having a comp structure. It's really important on the front end to set yourself up for success long term and ensure that you're not having to right size all of that later and that hitting your budget negatively as
But if
well.
you have a company that comes to you and say, you know what, ignorance is bliss in my case, and I don't want to do a pay equity analysis to uncover gaps that may exist. I'd rather not know if they exist at all. What do you say to that
Yeah.
employer who says something like that? And I don't know if you've actually had people say
Yeah.
that to you.
I so have.
I'm not surprised. I am not surprised.
Absolutely. No. That has absolutely happened before, and there I talked to them a little bit more about it because, yeah, there are some risks of once you have this information, you've looked at this, you can't
I know. I
unsee
know.
the inequities, right, or the information. There's no way around that, and so once you see it, you do have an obligation to address it. So we do talk with, like, our clients on the front end about how before we get into this project, like, are we all on the same page that we're committed to taking action from this? Because just like when you do an employee survey and you're surveying all of your
Mm.
employees, we talk about, are you going to do anything with this information? Because if not, it might actually be better to just not do it, right? Because that's going to have negative impact to employee morale and to things like that. I think a lot of times, though, employers are thinking it's going to be a lot worse than it is, if that makes sense. Oh, I don't want to do this employee survey because I'm going to get all this negative feedback, or there's going to be all kinds of inequities. And I think the reality is we just don't know until we do it. And it would be better to know what those issues are and tackle it, even if you can't right this very second increase everybody's pay or address all of the issues that an employee is going to tell you they have on a survey. We at least can develop like an action plan and be strategic about, okay, what are the highest priority things we need to immediately fix? Or do we have this path where we incrementally increase until we're able to get them to where they need to be? Or things like that. Like you need to have the information and you need to know to be able to fix the problem. That's always like my response or reaction to that is we don't know until we do it, and doing it and having that, then we can focus on how do we address this? What is the best way to do it? And it doesn't have to be all right this second. In a perfect world, yes, we'd love to just get it all done tomorrow, right? And make all the adjustments necessary, but that's not how the world works. And we can plan it out and we're able to work with you like side by side and figuring out how do we tackle this and make these adjustments that are really going to help you make sure you are retaining like all of these people that might need adjustments and for you to also know, okay, this we're really competitive in this area, so maybe that's okay and we focus on some other
When
positions.
organizations do this work well, meaning the comp structure and the ongoing, I don't know how ongoing it is. Maybe you can give me some insight like that pay equity analysis. But when they do it well, what changes in the middle management layer about how leaders, managers are talking about the pay structure with their teams? And it probably makes those annual conversations a little easier about pay, but I'm curious what changes
Yeah.
culturally.
It does. It makes it way easier. I think historically, managers, middle managers in particular, have always taken an approach to conversation of, oh, I don't know, I don't make the all the comp decisions, right? So this is just what you get, or this is what we're doing. Or they've just freeze a little bit and they're like, I don't know how to respond to this or talk about comp because it has been this taboo subject in the past. So I think when done well, when we've got our comp structure, when we've done our analysis and we're able to like articulate that and communicate that to not only our managers, but employees too, like just communicating what this looks like, what's our process, how we're ensuring that we're paying fairly and looking at market data and all of that, then we're just better equipped to have those conversations when an employee questions something about like, why is this position in a higher pay grade or paid more than me? Or if I'm trying to meet a certain goal that I have myself of where I want to increase my compensation or my responsibility to, what does that look like? What are the growth opportunities or other positions that are available to me that I could pursue to achieve those goals? Like it just, you're able to have really good conversations about that. And there's also less of that crosstalk or the time wasted in a lot of organizations when there is this culture of gossiping because we don't have the information or we don't know what the structure looks like or how these decisions are being made. So we like make up our own story
Right.
of what is actually happening. So I always say when you don't have a structure or information in front of people of how you're doing something, people are going to make it up, right? And assume how something is being done when that might not be the reality. Having that, again, gives you that framework. It gives you the ability to have those conversations, that structure that's really clear and transparent. And it just eliminates that awkwardness, that uncomfortableness about talking about comp and makes managers and leaders feel more confident in their ability to like speak to that too and share what that looks like.
It's pretty clear to me because I'm in it and I talk to all you very
Yeah.
smart HR professionals. Comp is not a one and done exercise. There's too many external factors
No.
and internal factors too. Like you got the revenue of your own company, the competitive market, the supply of professionals for the roles that you're looking for. There's market conditions like right now, employer market. So
Yeah.
wages aren't increasing significantly. Inflation, there's just
Yeah.
so many factors that it
Yeah.
seems like in 6 months' time, the structure or even equity analysis is probably outdated. What's realistically, how often do
Yeah.
you revisit the structure?
Yeah. What's cool about the process that we do and the structures that we put together is the data that we're pulling from is all
Mm,
updated quarterly. So that is really helpful because a lot of other like platforms that data can be pulled from, there'll be a survey that an organization does, right? And then that comes out. But by the time the survey data gets to other people, this is last year's
right.
data, right? And a lot can happen in a year or so. What's cool about that of quarterly is you're getting regular updates on that information. So when we're doing the project, we're looking at the most current data at the time we're doing it that's relevant to the past quarter. Most of the time, organizations will do increases on an annual basis, is what I've seen. So they'll do the initial structure and then they'll refresh or look at it annually, but they also can look at it quarterly. Again, right? The data is updated quarterly. So that could be something you could look at, especially if you have a particular position that you're finding a lot of market changes are happening a lot faster than they might be for other positions. So that's what our historical best practice recommendation has been is like you should be looking at this at least on an annual basis. Quarterly is also good
Mm.
because that's how frequently the data tends to be updated within the system that we use. So you could look at that on a quarterly basis if you want to really make sure that you are responding in the moment to those market challenges that are happening and pulling updated wage surveys and things for particular roles. That's what I would
Are there
say about
any
that.
signals or moments that would indicate that it's time to do a comp not restructure, but a structured analysis or just revisiting it?
Yeah. Two big ones come to mind for me. One is you're hiring for a position, you're posting for the position, and you're not getting a
Hmm.
ton of candidates or interest, or you maybe make it to the offer stage and you're getting feedback from potential candidates that you're not that pay doesn't meet their expectations or is not what they were expecting for the role. That could be an indication that, okay, we need to look at this to make sure we're able to recruit top talent. We're paying for what the position is worth. And then the other is if you have a lot of resignations. Hopefully you're doing exit interviews, right? And you hear from that process the feedback that its pay was a factor in the decision to leave. And so that could be another like signal that we need to look at our current process and either put a structure together if we don't currently have one, or update or refresh our structure to make sure that it matches the current kind of market conditions or what we're seeing. Those are the two big
Yeah,
ones
those are
that
good
come to
ones.
mind for me.
So if leaders are listening to this, maybe they've contemplated going down this road of a comp structure, pay equity analysis, like all of it, but they feel overwhelmed by it, both about the consequences of the
Yeah.
analysis, but also just maybe it's just a lot for them. They've never done this. They used to just have one-off
Yeah.
conversations and handle it that way. What's an approach? How do you put them at ease? Because I know you've had a lot of these conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a lot to tackle, and so that's why it's one of the service offerings that we have for our clients. We offer compensation structures, compensation structure refreshes, as well as pay equity analysis for our clients, and it's really helpful, I think, to have a third party come in and help look at all of this with you and evaluate it because, when you're in it and you're like running your business and you're just making these one-off decisions and you love the people that, you're supporting, it is hard to think about it objectively, right? Because when that person asks for $1 million, you're like, you're so great. I would love to give you $1 million. So it's just helpful to have a thought partner to walk through that and really look at what does the market data say, have that data point to go back to your team when we are doing comp projects, we're looking at base salary, but also total
Yeah.
compensation, right? Are there bonus incentives or other ways to like motivate and incentivize and support your team? So just you don't have to figure all of it out alone. It's especially if you're not like a data person, right? We will pull all that data for you in a way that is easy to follow and understand in a way that we're going to walk through it side by side with you, explain what the data says, and then what is our strategy going to be? Because I always like to say the data is the data, right? Here's all this data, but now what do we do with this? What is our strategy going to be? What area within this range do we want to target for our employees? What makes sense for our industry? Because it's so different based off of industry, employee size, revenue, budget. There's all kinds of factors that come into play, and it's a lot to consider and try to figure out on your own. Just piece it out. We have a phased approach where we're meeting regularly throughout the process and we're looking at different steps. And we're going to look at this segment of the workforce. We're now going to develop those pay ranges and grades. We're then going to slot people into that or positions into that. We try to break it down and make it as manageable for people as possible because we know it's a lot and it's not everyone's strong suit, right? They don't live in that world every day. They're focused on supporting their customers or operating their business. And that's our goal because
Yep.
it is a lot.
And I think what's just like the data itself is not core to what we do. We purchase large sets of data from
Yeah.
somebody else who's really good at finding this information
Yeah.
across all domains. We're really good at the consulting strategy and working with the
Yes.
clients on this. So I think that's what I would say about it too is like
Exactly.
we know what our lane is and what we're good at. So otherwise it could be overwhelming to try to do it
Exactly.
all.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got what you're good at, and we've got what
Yeah.
we're good at. And that's what we're here for and want to support
I
everyone
love it.
through. So you're
Yeah.
not alone in it.
Thanks for the insights, Nicole. I appreciate it. If somebody wants to connect with you, just to connect with you and just follow you, what's the best way? And if somebody wants to learn about more about compensation, what's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, of course, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm super open to connecting people with that on that platform. Happy to nerd out and talk about all things HR or compensation specifically, if that's something you're looking at considering as a 2026 goal. we're here to help. Feel free to link to all that information for me, Brandon, my LinkedIn, and then also people are welcome to reach out to me as
Thanks for
well.
coming on, Nicole.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.